Chapter 3 One Power. To understand the nature of God is to understand the basic principle of spiritual healing. Is it the nature of God to heal disease? Do you really believe that? If God is all-powerful and all-loving, why did he not heal it yesterday? Why is he waiting for today? And why is he not doing it today? Most of the people in the world believe that God works through doctors to heal them. But according to statistics, God was not doing too satisfactory a job of that before this century, was he? 100 years ago, people were dying daily of diseases which today are healed in 24 hours. Why? Did God want them to die? But not us? Is God a respecter of persons? God never has had pleasure in our dying. God never will have pleasure in our dying. And furthermore, God has never been responsible for our dying. People died because medical science had not advanced to the stage where their doctors knew enough to keep them alive, and some in this last century because their metaphysical and spiritual practitioners did not know enough to keep them alive. When you think of such things, the question inevitably arises: does God have anything to do with a person's being diseased? What does God have to do with healing them? There must be another principle involved in healing, and what is it? That principle is revealed through an understanding of the nature of God and the nature of that with which you are dealing. When you understand God to be infinite love, infinite wisdom, and infinite good, you will know that God is of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Disease is man-created, and only through man's developed spiritual consciousness will it be eradicated. If you can grasp the significance and truth of that statement, you will realize, then, the development of this spiritual consciousness is my responsibility. And you will be correct. Through prayer and contemplation, let the nature of God be revealed. Discover for yourself that God has never empowered a disease to kill. God has never ordained a disease to destroy. And because of the all-loving nature of God, disease must be outside the creative, maintaining, and sustaining power of God, which means that it is without cause, without foundation, law, substance, or action. There is only one power, and that one is God. The realization of God as one power, however, does not mean that God is a power over something. The belief that God is a power over something stems from our interpretation of the word power. God is power, that is true, but in order to understand God as power, it becomes necessary to change our concept of the meaning of the word power. The word itself connotes something which can be used, like the power of electricity, the power of heat, or the power of cold, all of which can be utilized for some purpose. Wind is another example of power, which can be harnessed or used. But is God that kind of a power? One power means what it says, one power, and it leaves no room for any other powers over which that one power is to be exercised, to be used or applied. God never can be used, and yet God is power, in fact. God is not only power, but the only power in this spiritual universe. To illustrate, under any and all conditions, do, re, and mi have certain values. Do is always do, Re is always re, mi is always mi. They may be sung off key by the whole world, but that does not change the value of do, re, or mi in the harmonic scale. So it is with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are complete within themselves, wherever used, or in whatever language. What established that as an invariable law? Not you, and certainly not I, not any man. There is a principle of life that has given to numbers and to musical notes their values. There is a principle of life that expresses itself in complete and perfect tones of music, complete and perfect numbers, complete and perfect laws of the universe. Who established these principles? Who maintains them? Who but God? God, who is the power of this universe, the creative and maintaining and sustaining principle of this universe. Can you use that God power? No, but you can bring yourself into accord with that power. You can bring yourself under the reign or government of that power, but you cannot use it. You cannot move a single star in heaven. You cannot change the tides. The hour of their coming and going is set for 1,000 years ahead. God is not a great power which will do something to the negative powers of sin, disease, lack, and limitation if you can contact him. God is power only in the sense that God is the creative principle of this universe. God has given us the sun for certain purposes, the oceans and the tides. God has given us the land, the valleys, the mountains, and the woods. All this God has given us, but he has not given us the power to use him for our purposes. The gifts of God can be used, but the power of God cannot be used. God is one power, maintaining and sustaining his universe, eternally, immortally, perfectly, harmoniously, and justly. When you begin to live from the standpoint of one power, the entire tenor of your experience is changed. In the world, you are constantly confronted with the appearance of persons, places, or things of a destructive nature. There is always something which would attempt to destroy your peace, your health, or the harmony of your affairs. The spiritually illumined of all ages have learned that these things are not power except insofar as they are given power by accepting them as powers and then fearing and fighting them. The Master Christ Jesus had no fear of any earthly power because he knew that there is only one power. When his disciples boasted of their power over evil, his rebuke was quick. Rejoice not that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. In other words, he was telling them to rejoice because they had learned the great secret, the great revelation. There is but one power, God. Therefore, there was no evil to be subject unto them, not even in his name. This is the secret that is not known to the materialistic world, to the mental, or even to some in the religious world. This is a secret known only to the mystical world. God is infinite power, and besides God, there is no other power. Is there power then in sin, disease, lack, limitation, death, weather, climate, infection, or contagion? Go back over it again. God is infinite power. Then, can there be power in infection and contagion? Can there be power in weather or climate? Can there be power in sin, disease, lack, limitation, or death? Can there be, if God is the only power? If it is true that God is one, the only law there can be is the law of God. Is there a law of disease if God is infinite law? The nature of God as one eliminates any such possibility. It eliminates laws of disease, laws of sin, laws of false appetite. If there is any law on earth, it must be the law of God. And since God is infinite, God's laws must partake of the nature of God. And what is that nature but love, intelligence, and wisdom? God is love, infinite love. Can there then be any power in hate, jealousy, animosity? Can there be power in anything that is not of the nature of love? All evidence points to God as the infinite intelligence of this universe. Is there any power other than that infinite, loving intelligence? If not, why then should you fear a law of disease, an injury to the brain, or the movement of the stars? Why should you fear anything in heaven or on earth or in the waters beneath the earth? If there is but one power operating, then nothing else is power. As soon as you begin to understand the nature of God as one life, one being, one law, one cause, immediately is brought to your attention evidence which would contradict that oneness. The world points out all the material laws which appear to exist as against the one spiritual law, disease as against the one spiritual life, age and death as against eternality and immortality. But if you understand God as one, you will perceive that in the infinite nature of God, there could be no power to oppose God. There is nothing negative in God's nature. As you perceive the nature of God to be a continuous state of immortal, eternal, harmonious being, you will discover that all these so-called forces and powers of the world are not power. Then you will understand what the Master meant when he said, "Resist not evil." When this reveals itself to you, never again will you appeal to God to overcome error in any form. Never will you turn to truth to overcome error. Never will you use right thinking to offset wrong thinking. Never will you pray to God to heal disease, sin, or fear. You will know that in the infinite nature of God's goodness, disease, sin, and fear do not exist as power. In God's kingdom, there is no such thing as truth over error, God over the devil, good over evil, right over wrong, or spirit over matter. There is only infinite, immortal, eternal God being. If you can be made to fight or to look to God to overcome some form of activity, you will lose. In fact, if you can be made to look to God to overcome anything on earth, you will lose. Only in proportion as you realize that, as in heaven, so on earth, God is infinite, and that the battle is not yours. Only in the attaining of that consciousness can you come into harmony. The moment that you can be tempted to fight a person, a sin, or a disease, you become engaged in a battle which in the end will destroy you. In and of itself, a problem has no power, but by imputing power to it, you then begin to react as if it had power. If you try to meet your problem by means of whatever you accept as material power, there will always be the possibility that the opponent, whether that opponent be a person, thing, or condition, will prove to have a stronger belief in material power than your own power. If you try to meet the problem by means of mental might or right thinking, again, there is the possibility that your opponent will wield a stronger mental weapon. A drastic change must take place in individual consciousness to enable the people of this world to cope with life and all its problems and to look at evil, sin, disease, war, poverty, and be able to say, "What is that to me? Thou couldst have no power over me, unless it came from the creative principle of the universe, which is God. I am resting in one power. Until you can realize that there is nothing to battle because there is only one power, you will be carrying a chip on your shoulders, everlastingly fighting people, sin, disease, false appetite, lonesomeness, and poverty. One condition after another will arise in your experience as long as you are fighting and resisting. But when you understand God as one power, you become convinced that there is nothing to oppose him. The only way this can be proved when the appearance of sin, disease, death, lack, or limitation touches you, whether in your own experience or in that of your friends or relatives, is to sit in an inner stillness and realize that God is infinite. Wait in quietness and in peace until an inner assurance comes. There are no gods besides me, no other powers, nothing for you to fear. Thou art my beloved child. This is spiritual wisdom. There is nothing with which to contend, nothing to heal or reform or supply or overcome. Know the truth. There is only one God, whether in the Occident or in the Orient, one God, whether among the Greeks or the Jews, the bond or the free, there is only one God, and the I in the midst of me is that God, infinite, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, the only power. There is no power besides the I that I am. That I am is immortal and eternal. Because of my oneness with the Father, my oneness with the I that I am, all the intelligence, all the wisdom, all the life, all the spirituality, all the power, all the good, and all the grace of God are embodied within me. To do spiritual healing, it is necessary to be able to look any form of sin or disease in the face with complete confidence. Neither do I fear thee, nor will I battle thee. Why should I fear what mortal man can do to me? Why should I fear what mortal things or persons or conditions can do to me, if God himself is the only law, presence, power, cause, substance, and reality? I will stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Our devotion is to a God so infinite that besides him, nothing exists to be wiped out or destroyed. Nothing exists which has power to limit, to hinder, or to prevent anyone who understands the principle from carrying on any rightful activity, since God, in the midst of him, is an all-knowing intelligence, a divine love, an infinity of power, the only creative influence or principle in the entire universe. In this principle is embodied not only the secret of healing, but the secret of harmony in your life. You are now carried through life rhythmically as on a beam of light. All that is required of you, he performs. That he, at the center of your being, that infinite invisible that works while you sleep, that infinite invisible that goes before you and prepares the place for you, making those you meet along the way receptive and responsive to the love you express. After persistent practice of this principle, you come to see that it is literally true. God is the infinity of being, the allness of being, and all the things the world is battling are not power at all. In moments of illumination, you look out on the world and behold world appearances dissolving as darkness dissolves before the light. In those exalted moments, you can invite all the lions and tigers of the world into your consciousness, knowing that the light that is there will dissolve the appearance and reveal them in their true nature.